This morning, serious questions about election integrity in Minnesota. A voter is now under investigation after allegedly casting two ballots. And it isn't just speculation, there's video and a police report backing it up. Joining me now is election integrity investigator Rick Weibel. Rick, so good to have you on the show today. You uncovered this by looking over daily absentee data in Sherburne County, and a red flag was raised that caught your eye. What did you see?
We actually saw many new voter registrations and connected to absentee ballots, and the daily absentee data was showing that there was no voter ID. And we were seeing high numbers of registrations that were occurring, and it raised an alarm because it seemed that in this particular area, it was very, very targeted. And we were trying to figure out what election was this potential group targeting. And so over time, we figured out that it was more of a city council race that was being targeted. And let's play the video because it speaks volumes, and I may want to interrupt the video as we go along as some of the narrative. And so here we see the teacher is arriving with his voters, and that white van back there that you see, that has Texas license plates. It's a rental vehicle. Here's the teacher right here. This is Mr. Rage. And what's interesting is he's not even a registered voter. And I looked back in November of 2024 on November 10th, and even currently, he's still not a registered voter in the state of Minnesota. And here you can see the teacher is carrying a ballot for this voter, or registration paperwork up for this voter, up to the clerk. And he's doing a lot of handling and connecting with voters there. And you can see a little bit of the chaos going here where, of course, there are a lot of questions. But typically, wouldn't you want a registered voter to really help you through this process if they're an interpreter?
The answer is yes. And I want to go back to this teacher apparently handling the ballots and the paperwork here. Rick, when I go in to vote and I show my voter ID, usually the volunteers there and the workers there, they tell me, because there are several, usually two or three blank ballots on the table after I show my ID. They tell me to choose one. I choose it, and then I go to the machine. From the machine, I go to the tabulator, and the lady tells me, or the man tells me, to stick it into the machine. Nobody touches my ballot except for myself. So that there raises a red flag too, because they're not supposed to be touching these ballots, correct?
That is correct. And especially when we talk about voter secrecy, we want to make sure that every person's vote is private. And we see in this video that that's not happening because he's even reviewing the ballots, not just the voter registration forms in this video.
Wow. And so, this person comes in, this teacher comes in. Did this teacher come in with just one person or multiple people?
Multiple people. And he also came in multiple times throughout the day. And this is what's absolutely incredible. So during this particular day, he came in twice. And there were other days that he was coming in throughout the absentee period in Minnesota's election, which is basically 45 days. And it's absolutely stunning that in this video, there's a 45-minute time window where a voter actually votes twice. And in this video, there's even a spot where you can see the teacher is sitting down and actually reviewing and filling out somebody's ballot. And he does this multiple times on this particular day. And we have multiple videos that we have received from Sherburne County. Sherburne County is one of three counties that intersects St. Cloud, Minnesota. And what's interesting is that this teacher was observed apparently hitting multiple counties, helping voters cast their ballots. And so this is just absolutely incredible. And we can even see that he's filling out the forms, he's correcting the voter registration forms, he's reviewing ballots, he's putting the ballots into the envelopes, he's having conversations directly with the clerk. And it makes you wonder, what's this conversation going on when he's not with a voter to do any type of interpretation. And so it just begs all sorts of questions throughout this process.
Absolutely. I have a lot of questions right now with this breaking report. So let's go back. The group of people that this teacher is walking in with, does that tie to the rules that you were looking at that raised the red flags originally, that you had all of these new voters with no voter IDs? Do we know if these are some of the same people?
Yes, and what we see as well as we're looking at multiple days, we have concerns, and part of the problem is that because of the face coverings, it's hard to identify every single person, and so this is where I think a full review of all of the paperwork needs to be done by the FBI and the Department of Justice to really look at what did happen here, because just the fact that there was actually a case where a voter was, quote unquote, voting multiple times, the state basically kind of just said, we're not going to worry about that, and didn't pursue it any further. And what's interesting is that that voter, when I look at the voter records, has no indication of a vote cast for the 2024 election. But we don't see a chart that basically says that there were votes that were spoiled or not accepted during the 2024 election in a reasonable amount of numbers. And so when we see this type of dystopian happening and this disconnect between the number of absentee ballots being accepted by the county, and then at the end, when we look at the voter histories and the absentee numbers are not equivalent, that's where we kind of look at some of the fingerprints of fraud to basically look at, we need to investigate this and represent candidates. And so early on, a good attorney out of Minnesota, Matt Benda, when I saw this data, I alerted him to go talk to one of the candidates. And so he filed FOIA requests of the counties that this candidate was part of. And so this really started in October of 2024. And so he did such a great job of following up on the case and the historical evidence of it. And what we find out is that Mr. Rage, the teacher, presented false ID to the police officers. And we have that police report available at MidwestSwampWatch.com that you can read it. And I've also this morning just posted the case in district court regarding the double or the Tyler Rage issue, but also the double voter. And you can kind of see just a hot mess of what is going on. There's a full report that is about 384 pages that we're still pouring through, and we'll have more information out as to what we find and uncover. And so this truly is a developing story, and a lot of credit goes to Matt Benda, who writes a Substack article about this a couple months ago in Benda for Common Sense is the Substack group that you can take a look at. And he outlines some of the things in there, and the fact that the sheriff's department kind of label Raj the teacher is absolutely stunning. And so when we think about election fraud, is he teaching these people about election fraud or truly how to vote? And why does he have such supervisory oversight of these elections to where he's filling out the forms, he's directing traffic, and even reviewing people's ballots? And so what I understand interpreters to be is that they're supposed to help you fill out the forms, but they're not supposed to point where you're supposed to vote, or they're not supposed to tell you how to vote, or even touch your ballot, or even take a pen to your ballot. And we see that in this video. And so it's absolutely disturbing. It's disgusting. And we even see in the longer report, when the sheriff had actually interviewed some of the folks, they felt pressured to vote. And so what we know about some of the Somali culture is that sometimes women don't have the full rights as the men in their family structures, that we're a little concerned that if anybody is being forced to vote against their will or they're uncomfortable, we should never create that type of environment. And so when we think about Minnesota law and we think of federal laws where the voting place is supposed to be a place of sanctity and quiet and peace, we see this chaos here in Sherburne County, and it's a complete it's a complete mess. You've got voters sitting there waiting in line, people cutting in. You've got the teacher running all over the place. I mean, it's completely disorganized, and it's just crazy. And here's the example of the double voter that she's back picking up her second ballot, and she's about to cast it. And we have that in this video. And so it's just absolutely stunning. The beauty of that is that we have the clock there in the back that we can actually see that it is from the same day with the outfits that the county workers are wearing, but also the clock on the back wall that we can actually see that it occurred at that point in time. And there he is, the teacher bringing the ballot up there and doing all of the work. And that really shouldn't be happening at all. And so this is where it's just absolutely stunning, and this needs to be investigated. And this is where, here I am from South Dakota, and I have John Thune as the leader of the Senate. And when we look at the Real ID and pass the SAVE Act to make sure that we have voter ID, this is a seminal video where there are a lot of questions being raised as, okay, why is Mr. Rage not a registered voter? How is he able to help these voters? Who's paying for him? Who's paying for the rental card? What is going on here? And then how is Ms. Guri's vote not counted in the elections? And why are there so many gaps within the election itself? And so it makes me wonder how many of these people are legal, how many of these people are illegal, and how many of these people are being pressured to vote. And we even see in the larger police report, and a little bit of a hint in this one here that's online, is that some of these folks were brought across the street and basically coffee was purchased for them as well. And so it's kind of like a little reward. And so there's so many things here that are just so off color that Minnesota needs to protect their elections, but with the Democrats in control, it won't happen. And so we need the help of the federal government to go after these blue states to help protect the actual vote of the real voters that are there, but also we need to have ID out there. And Minnesota is one of these states where you can vouch for up to 8 people. But if you are part of a nursing home, you're part of a health and human services type contract, whether it's a shelter, whether it's a nursing home, you take that 8 and you flip it on its side, and now it's unlimited. You can vouch for. And so I wonder how many voters he's actually vouching for versus interpreting. And so there's a lot of questions here.
There's so many questions. Going back to this police report, can you tell us who actually filed it? This incident happened in October of 2024, the video we've been watching. Who actually filed the report, and has it just been sitting there until you started raising questions along with others?
Well, yes and no. And so actually, let's give credit where credit is due. Thank God there are great election workers in Sherburne County and throughout the United States. They actually stepped up and said, hey, we think that there's an issue here. And they collected as much evidence there. And the auditor's office basically asked the county sheriff to investigate this further and kind of handed them the evidence. And so here we look at the police report and we see the 2 counts there of felony unlawful voting that the sheriff was investigating. And so they determined that after subsequent interviews that she voted for one office but forgot to vote for another one, and so that's why she requested another ballot. Well, it doesn't really make sense, and especially if that was true, because the way that absentee balloting works is that there's actually what's called a record ID that's assigned to the outer envelope of each of the ballots, that if they suspected that, they could have gone into the ballot box, retrieved that for that voter because they could have looked it up in the database, and they could have potentially discarded the original ballot and allowed her to vote on a secondary one. But that doesn't appear that's what happened here. And so it's really disgusting that when I look up this voter name, I don't see a voter history for her in the 2024 election. So it raises more questions here. And when we look at this election, it doesn't just have state consequences, but it also has federal consequences. And so we had tried to do our due diligence to bring this up to the Department of Justice by giving them this report, but also giving them the information and also alerting them to the December 15th trial settlement regarding Mr. Rage. because he also voted on people's ballots, and they tried to bury that part of it as well, when we can clearly see that in the videos. And so there's, I think, charges that should have been brought against him. And what's interesting is that when you look at the court case that we now have published up at Midwest Swamp Watch, it's basically just a presentation of a false ID that they basically go after on this, and that's just not right. And so when you have 3 counties that were involved in this, and potentially Keith Ellison would have been notified about this, that they're trying to bury this, and when we try to bring it to the Department of Justice attention, I think they're so short-staffed, especially with happening in Minnesota. And then we have the Department of Justice attorneys, Thompson and his crew, basically resign in the last couple of months over the other Somali fraud and the questions that they had regarding ICE. And so now Minnesota is basically starting from square one when we look at all of the fraud that's happening there in Minnesota. And you add this on top of it, and when you look at elections, when you have fraud in your elections, this is where I truly believe elections is the gateway to understanding your government. If you have fraud in your elections, you can pretty much assume that you're going to have fraud in the rest of the government.
You're absolutely right. And so I hope the people of Minnesota are aware. That's why we have you on today, because you won't find this on mainstream media. But this is proof that there is cheating going on in elections. And you're absolutely right, Rick, that there's so much going on in Minnesota right now. I pray these people wake up and vote for, change in their state, because we've seen Nick Shirley unveil and uncover all of the fraud going on. We've been very adamant here on Lindell TV about how important it is to secure our elections, and here we are yet again this morning with some proof, video evidence of people coming in and voting multiple times, people's hands on ballots that shouldn't be there, all going on in Minnesota. It is time for a change.
It really is, and I really want to. My heart goes out to those election workers that had to deal with this chaos to try and make sure that they conducted the elections in a fair way for all of the other voters that were there as well. But there are definitely, when you look at this video, I would encourage the Minnesota State Legislature to look at performance improvements, because even we saw in the last part of the video clip that you displayed there, you could tell that those voting booths were not quite private enough for voters to actually vote in secret. And so that is absolutely stunning. So I think there's, and when we look at, there's a lack of party oversight and a lack of poll watchers being there. Minnesota really needs to clean this up. And so this video and the next series of videos that we release, I think will basically showcase we need to do things better. We need to protect the voter privacy, the secrecy. We need to be checking IDs. We need to make sure that all of these voters are real voters. We need to make sure that voters are voting for who they want and no one else is bringing a pen to that ballot.
Right. And I'm glad you came on here this morning with this evidence and new revelations coming up in this story that you have been working on. I know you're continuing to sift through all of the paperwork, lots of papers to go through as you continue your investigation. Please keep us updated on what's going on in this case and also everything else going on in Minnesota. While we have you, Rick, we have about 2 minutes left. I was talking to you last night. There's also a case in South Dakota you're following. Can you give us any information there?
Oh, this is a little bit more of a stay tuned, but what we have going on in South Dakota is kind of another feature, is that we actually have legislation in South Dakota that was passed by both chambers, and it is sitting on Governor Roden's desk. And it's South Dakota's version of the SAVE Act requiring voter ID. And what's great about this is that is there going to be a race between South Dakota and the U.S. Senate as to who actually will deliver this and get it signed between Trump and Larry Roden. What's interesting is that this has been sitting on Larry Roden's desk since March 10th. And in South Dakota law, if it goes unsigned for 15 days, excluding, I'm guessing, holidays and Sundays, then it actually becomes law automatically. And so I think there might be a little bit of a challenge that if Governor Roden signs it ahead of Thune being able to get it out of the Senate, that may look bad for optics. And so I really encourage the U.S. senators, please pass the SAVE Act, get it onto Trump's desk. And this very video that you see here is exactly one of the reasons why we have to get better oversight of our elections. And so hopefully this kind of gives and encourages many of those other senators that had any type of a doubt. This is one of the cases in my neighboring state of Minnesota that we have evidence that the SAVE Act would actually have a positive impact on this.
Absolutely. And I think that deadline is coming up Friday, if my math is correct, right? For
Yes.
South Dakota. So we'll definitely keep an eye out on that. Everyone stay tuned for their own bill, their version there in South Dakota. We'll keep you posted. Rick, I want to remind people one more time. I know you're going to come on and continue to keep us updated, and we appreciate that in this one particular case in Minnesota. But you also have your website that has a lot of this information as well, MidwestSwampWatch.com. People can go there. You have it on your homepage. There it is right now, the 2024 Sherburne County report. That entire report, we just showed you a clip of it here, but he has that all posted on his website. So go take a look for yourself as Rick and his team continue to investigate this. Rick, I appreciate you coming on today. Please keep us posted.
You bet. Thank you so much. Stay awesome, everyone, and make sure you positively encourage your legislators, your senators to do the right thing, and stay awesome, everybody.